Hello, everyone. Welcome to the webinar on how to integrate competitive strategy into your sales approach. I have our amazing, illustrious speakers with me, Carol and Bentley. We're going to get started in a couple minutes here. I was somehow muted. As most of you probably know, we're in meeting fatigue. We go from one meeting to the next meeting to the next meeting to the next meeting to the next meeting. So we're going to give a minute or two for people to catch up. Meetings. We do have quite a few shuffling in. Again, you are at the right place. Thank you for coming to the webinar on how to integrate competitive strategy into your sales training approach. We're going to get started in just another minute or so. We have quite a few people still shuffling in. All right, I think we're going to go ahead and get started here in just 1 minute. We've got a few people coming in right now. I'm guessing probably some Teams issues that we've all been experiencing over the last couple days. So we're just going to give that extra minute. But thank you everybody for joining. While everybody shuffles in, I'll just go over some FAQs. We're using Microsoft Teams platform today. It's a very interactive platform. You have the ability to chat for questions and answers. Um, Please do use that throughout this entire webinar. We want this to be a very interactive session, so please use your chat features. Please use your Q&A. We would love to have this be a session in which people came and they got answers. That yes, we're here to listen to Bentley and Carol describe competitive strategy and how that can apply into their sales approach. But maybe there's something in particular you had a question. Please don't hesitate to ask those. I am Nolan Hout with InfoPro Learning, who is hosting this webinar today. For those not familiar with us, we've been in this space for just over 30 years in the corporate learning sector. Sales training is a particularly area of focus of ours, but we are a full service learning organization that can really help your organization with anything that comes to unlocking the potential of your people. But you're not here to listen to me. So I'm going to put myself on mute and I'm going to turn off my camera and let Carol and Bentley take over. Bentley, I think I somehow muted you and I can't unmute you. So just so you know, you'll have to unmute yourself. But that was an accident on my
I
side. But
unmuted. Yeah, there you go.
yeah. All right. Well, thank you so much. I'm going to hop off camera. Best of luck, Carol, Bentley. I'll still be in the
Thanks.
chat and helping you all out throughout the session. Thank you.
Thanks,
Thank-
Nolan.
yeah.
And I'm gonna jump in first and just say I'm Carol Cohen from InfoPro Learning, and my focus as a VP of Strategy and Sales Enablement is to lead the sales training practice. And in so doing, I have a book on real selling, which I think is a follow-on to COVID. Thank you, Bentley. COVID and Challenger. You know, we've all experienced multi methodologies through the world, and I like to look at those as the what to do, and real selling is how to do it. Research, engage with your customer, advocate for your customer, and lead to the solution. So, in the process of all that, I've been thinking about sales training in particular and what kind of gaps people have and in their sales process and training and enablement, and realize that the real gap is around competitive. Now, if you ask the salespeople, they'll tell you exactly what they need: a silver bullet that will kill the competition dead. And we all know that that is rare if ever exists. So the truth is you need what I found out when I got Bentley's book, let me show you that I have his book. When I got Bentley's book and I thought of Bentley, I was like, who in the world is the expert on this? And I thought of my history through the years. The only name I could come up with is Bentley Radcliffe. And he has a book called Checkmate. He is an analyst, a competitive analyst, and the biggest thing I want him to talk about is the difference between competitive intelligence and competitive strategy, and how he can just enable success in salespeople by having a better understanding of that. So with that, I will turn it over to Bentley to um, introduce himself and get started in the conversation. We're just going to take it as a kind of a fireside chat between us and just talk about the things we're passionate about. And we hope that's helpful to you. So Bentley?
Thank you, Carol. Well, as Carol has already introduced me, I'm Bentley Radcliffe. I have been working in the competitive market for a very long time. I'd say 25 years now. And I started with it during my days at Sun Microsystems and understanding strategy. One of the things that that company at the time was extremely good at was competitive strategy, because we were the newcomer in the market, competing with companies of the time, Hewlett Packard, Digital Equipment Corporation, Compaq, Silicon Graphics, all of those different kinds of companies. And that's where I kind of cut my teeth on the competitive side. We used to gather intelligence, and one of the most important areas of intelligence is understanding what your competition can and cannot provide you in the market, or provide the customer. And I would gather that data, and with a team, we worked on, how are we going to beat the other team? Now, that was great from a product point of view. The challenge was we'd create these things called battle cards, or SWOT analysis, which we'll talk a little more in detail, and hand it to the sales rep. And what the salesperson would typically do is hand that to the customer. Well, the challenge is that the competitor did exactly the same thing, and they handed theirs to the customer, and the customer handed ours to the competitor, and vice versa. And we ended up with what they were saying about us and what we were saying about them, and nobody was really winning anything. And lo and behold, our manager, which was Scott McNeely at the time, came in and he says, "You guys have to stop thinking about why we're better or not, because at the time we had something called Spark, and it wasn't very good. We have to beat them with strategy." And I was like, "Well, what do you mean by strategy?" And we started talking through it. He says, "What is the challenge that these companies have? What's their greatest strengths? And then how are you going to create a disadvantage for them?" And this was a very interesting kind of model. Being a young kind of salesperson, I was like, okay, well, that's a different way to approach it. And even though we knew that one competitor in the marketplace had probably a 6 times advantage over us, we managed to kill them. So the idea is that competitive intelligence is incredibly important. You have to have it. It's very important for developing products and services. But how do you actually use it in a sales environment? Now, this is what I've been doing over the years. I met Carol doing a number of programs of sales training. I've also done sales process and value generation in my history. But we needed a way to beat the competition. In fact, one of the companies that she worked with was the company that we had actually targeted in the other program. So I got to do it in the reverse way and watch it, how well it could work on someone who wasn't suspecting that they had a similar kind of strategy. Over the 25 years, I've done this so many times that now, when I'm out with a sales organization, I love to sit down and say, "Give me your most difficult competitive situation," and then I give them a strategy on how to challenge or how to challenge it with the customer. So that's kind of who I am. I've had my own business, my own software business over the years. I created a virtual sales kit that we delivered on mobile, and I sold that business after 20 years. I sold it in 2018 and have been consulting ever since.
Cool. Well, you made me think of something when you were talking about the strategy versus intelligence thing. What I see a lot happening is that sales people assume they understand their competitive position, and often they undersell themselves. For instance, they may compare themselves to a set of supposed competitors who are really not like them, um, or they really don't do as much as they do, and they really have a much bigger competitive advantage, and they don't realize it. Do you think that's just a matter of research? Because in my sales training, I kind of focus on research, but give some guidance on what to research. I hate guessing and assuming. I think we can agree on that, that's not a good approach. But
Yeah.
start
Well,
there.
it's a good question. Competitive tends to come late in the game. Most salespeople don't incorporate a competitive strategy or even competitive intelligence early in the game. They assume, as you said, that they know what the customer or what the competitor has. And there's two kinds of parts. There's three stages to competition. One is your research or your preparation. I call it preparation. And that's having a good understanding of what the competitor has, what's their strengths, what's their weakness, um, and what the opportunity might be. Now, the second part of that research is what the customer is using. We have different ways of different companies have different ways to kind of identify. But if I'm going into an account that is greenfield, which is rare in this day and age, right?
Right.
But has nothing. Listen, if it's AI, if I'm selling AI solutions right now, it's greenfield because a lot of companies don't have any AI solutions. If I'm selling something that's, as you have in it's construction equipment, well, heck, there's plenty of construction equipment out there already. So it's not like it's something new. So those are rare. I call those white accounts because it's something I've never actually approached. This is part of preparation. Most often, accounts are what I call yellow. They're accounts that will buy a little bit from here. They buy the best of what they can get. Right. And you will see that very often, no matter what industry you're in, is whether you're buying software, which is where I come from, software and hardware. Um, I may have a little bit of I may use Amazon, AWS for some of my cloud services, but I also have Salesforce. And then I also have some other web-based applications that are basically, if I'm in the mortgage business, I'm using a mortgage application. So I'm kind of sharing the wealth across multiple companies. It's very important in the preparation to understand what is the opportunity that I have there. Because if they said, well, we only buy Microsoft and we will not buy anybody else's anything at any given time, that's a red account. That's a whole different strategy, and you could have the best features and capabilities that blow the competition away, and they're not going to listen. So what you're going back to your question is, in a yellow account, knowing where your strengths are, also knowing your weakness. I have a program that I tell people is kind of like owning your weakness, because a lot of times a seller, and you can't blame them, will try to hide the weakness that they have. They're not going to come out to the customer and say, hey, we're really not very good at doing this. So I mean, it's just not going to happen. On the other hand, your competition is going to tell the customer exactly what that weakness is, and guess what, you've kind of lost a little credibility by not bringing it out. So you kind of try to own it with the customer and not talk about where we're strong and where we have challenges. And that's what strategy is to actually own these kinds of situations and be able to provide it. So going into accounts, the one thing that has been always the most frustrating about competition with me is that salespeople tend to wait till it's almost too late. And that's why we have these war rooms and competitive intelligence teams, which is also called CI, that get the last minute. They have to come up with some kind of way to kill the competition. And that's what you call the silver bullet.
Right.
And sadly, the silver bullet is it's a rarity. It happens once in a while. A company will make a mistake, and it will come out. And I use the Boeing example because it's easy. Everybody understands what happened to the Boeing 737 MAX. They had an issue with software, and unfortunately, very sadly, it crashed 2 aircraft, and over 300 people. Well, I can promise you that Airbus took advantage of that situation. It was a silver bullet of the best kind, not because people passed away, but because nobody's going to get on that plane, and they grounded all of the planes. So what happened to sales at Airbus? They went through the ceiling because they couldn't get Boeing aircraft. So, that's a silver bullet. Rare, rare, rare in a game. Usually you've got fairly strong companies that have strengths, they have weaknesses, but they don't have anything that's a I was going to use the word killer, but I don't want to use that.
No,
That was
no,
that
please.
yeah. But I mean that's a great example. We talked a little earlier. There are also stances on things that cause silver bullets to happen, and you could, a CEO could say the wrong thing at a meeting. Right now, Microsoft is dealing with a funny situation where they were cutting back on payroll and cutting back, and then they had a blowout quarter, and they gave the CEO a raise. Well, guess what? That's kind of had a major impact across the whole company. Going, wait a second, what's going on here? We're getting cut, and no raises, but he's getting a raise, and we had a blowout quarter. Why? So those kinds of things happen, and you can count on that other companies are going to take advantage of that for hiring, because we all know how difficult it is to find good people.
Right.
So
Yeah,
and
I want to jump in too and talk about the R in real, which is research, understanding it from the customer's perspective and what the customer perceives about you is
yeah,
really important in that process. And we run into it ourselves because um, we tend to, and I think a lot of companies do this. They look at price, right? So they get pushback on price. And my feeling is that pushback can mean multiple things. It can mean for real, they only have a very limited budget and they want the cheapest thing out there and they don't really care how good it is because they just need it to be cheap. But it also could be just because procurement has a rule that you have to answer the question that you actually negotiated the best price. I always say to that one and to all salespeople, the answer to that is always yes. You don't have to do anything else. It's just on you that you feel you have the best price. But what it also means too is then you often compare yourself, the salesperson will fall in the rut of believing that they are the same as the low cost version of themselves, right? Rather than looking at their own value and putting that own value forward because they're not mapping it to that customer business requirement or that industry need that they have. And sidebar, I have your slide up if you ever need me to show it. But if you want to talk about that idea of, I mean, I always say if it's competitive intelligence, you have to be thinking about the past, you have to be thinking about the present, and you have to be thinking about the future all at the same time. And you have to align it both to your own perspective and the customer perspective. And that's why you need a guy like you. But it's a lot of things to think about. Any specific advice to that?
well, you're right. You covered a couple of different things, but first of all, everybody wants to get the best price. I've never actually walked in and had somebody say, "Hey, name your price. I'll buy
Yeah,
it, whatever."
give me the highest price you got.
That would
I'll
be
take
that
it.
would be great. Although I often wonder when you drive by 2 gas stations, and one of them's 20 cents a gallon more on one side than the other, and the one with the 20 cents is packed. I'm like, why? Maybe they just don't care. What you're describing is what I call sell. You either sell through price or you sell with price. Okay. And what you were describing is a lot of times a salesperson will sell through price. They'll just use price as a differentiator. We're the lowest cost that you could get. Right. And that doesn't necessarily always win the client. When you sell with price, you're building a value proposition around the price that you want to charge for it and why that it's valued that way. That way, if you actually use that kind of model, when a competitor comes in with a lower price, the customer is resistant to the lower price. If you're both selling through price, then obviously the customer is going to drive it to the bottom, and purchasing's job is to get it to the lowest possible price.
Right.
Actually, you could like you lose money, and so this happens. This happens a lot. Price is an objection. Just look at it that way. It's not an obstacle unless you're so far out of price and you can never get even close to what the customer has budgeted. And no matter when you enter an account, the first thing someone's going to tell you is, well, we don't have a lot of money to spend. All right. So that's kind of like the automatic. I hear that as a consultant. I hear that all the time. We just don't have a lot of money to spend. And then magically they find money when they want something that
Correct.
so
Correct.
if you learn to sell with price, talk about price, validate price along the way. Are we in the right ballpark? Because our product, whatever that product may be, a piece of software, is going to cost X amount. Now, with that said, once you reach a certain level of plateau, like Amazon Web Services, right? They're considered the golden child of cloud services. Sorry, and they can charge a higher price, and customers are willing to pay for it. Cisco is another excellent example of that, where the customer is willing to pay more for the solution because, one, they're considered the best, and two, I have people that know how to make it work. I move into other products. Let's say we talked about construction equipment, right? The first thing comes to mind is Caterpillar. They're the #1 construction dirt moving company, and it's the safe decision. Although there are other products out there that are made by other companies that make as good or better product than Caterpillar, probably for a lesser price, but often, the customer is willing to pay for it. You can go through almost any industry and find that kind of thing. It's like when you go buy gas stations. Again, we use that as an example. You see a Chevron or a Texaco or an Arco or one of those companies. Okay, that's a quality gasoline. And then you see mom and pop's gas stop, and they're 20 cents cheaper. You don't want to stop there because you don't know what's in that gas. But the reality is it's exactly the same gas because it's a commodity. They run on the same gas pipeline. So, you have to really kind of just learn to create value for your brand that says, okay, I'm willing to pay 15, 20% more than I might be willing to do before. Some of that is part of the research. You can find out how customers buy. There's so much information nowadays on the web. As you called it research, I call it preparation, is understanding the account, understanding the buying habits. People post to LinkedIn, they post to Facebook. Look. And then today, there are some great tools that you could get, that hook into your Salesforce that actually use AI to do the research for you. I've got a partnership with a company called Sentia that actually does that, and it does all the research for you when you click on the account name, and it tells you the company's all about, what the person has written, and actually that it's like immediate information that I can gather on somebody, and then say, okay, I see that this person is price sensitive, or I see that this person is value sensitive, and I could use that. I mean, that's really more sales process than it is competitive, but it's also all part of that preparation and identifying the account and understanding the account. So
It's kind of it's to my mind, it's a competitive mindset. And I'll give you one example. We were on a discovery call with a company that's sort of like an umbrella company for a bunch of tiny little contracting companies that take care of wet basements, right? And the guy we were talking to was saying, I need the cheapest price for training. I got to have the cheapest price, and I got to do that. And I said, well, okay, I have a wet basement, and I need to get a bid on that. Should I take the cheapest price? And he's like, well, we're going to be a little more expensive than your local guy. I'm like, well, wait a minute, why? And then he starts giving me the whole pitch of his value, and I'm thinking, well, hey, man, that's exactly what we're talking about here. We're bringing you a value product, and you're asking for the cheapest one, except you don't want your customers to do that to you. So let's look at the perspective of our customers. And the other thing I want to throw in there too is, look at the size of their deals,
Yeah.
because understanding what they sell, how they sell it, how they position their pricing, how they position value gives you insight on how they're going to appreciate your approach, and you need to adjust it to
Yeah.
that, right?
That's why the
I
research
think.
you mentioned is so important, understanding. Yeah, something like a wet basement. I've never thought about that before because I live in Florida and we don't have basements. But
Come on, you spent enough time in New England. You know what a wet basement's
yeah, not really, but that's okay. I can imagine that's not a very pleasant
No,
situation.
it's a bad
So,
thing. Yeah.
and yeah, there are probably going to be local guys, and then there are going to be the national or the regional
Right.
kind of companies that have a little more. And what it is they tend to have better equipment, they have better guarantees. You can count on them, so their value proposition has a level above what the local guy is. If you're looking for the cheapest guy, yeah, I mean you could find somebody to come in and probably do the job, but in a year, if you have a challenge, you can't go back to that.
Right.
And
Exactly.
that's always a challenge. It's all part of preparation. And Carol, you teach the sales process, and that's a critical factor in any business. I told a story and actually told it to my son yesterday because he's starting a new job in sales. And I said, I used to have a very good friend. He was an NFL player. And he played for the Cardinals. His name was Greg Davis. And he was a kicker. And after he kind of retired, obviously these guys age and they get beat up. He told me it was like being hit by a brick wall after you got the ball off the ground. He said all these guys hit you really hard.
Right.
And he said, so I only get, you can only do so many years and then you're done. He went into sales and very quickly became the number one seller for his company. Now, it didn't hurt the fact that he was who he was, because there were a lot of people that wanted to meet him. But on the other hand, what he said to me, he says, what I learned, he says, I got a whole group of salespeople. He says, they put me through the basics and I learned the basics and I studied the basics and I practiced the basics. He says, none of them practice or look back at the basic sales process ever. He says, because they've been doing it for 20 years. They don't feel like they need to. He says, let me tell you something about the NFL. He says, preseason, we practice the basics. We practice the basics over and over every single year. When we get out on the playing field, if we have a good game or a bad game, we have a bad game, we go back and we practice the basics. We have a good game, we go back and we practice the basics. He says it's what's critical to make sure that we know what to do. It becomes just natural. He says, one of the reasons I feel that I've done so well is I constantly go back and practice the basics because it's part of my DNA. And I thought to myself, that's a critical thing that salespeople just don't do, and sales process, and why people like you and I try to get out there often to do, whether we're doing webinars or we're doing it in class, but it's why we go out there to do this, because we have to bring them back to some of the things that we know, the block and tackling. That's just it. What I love about sales strategy is there's often a small amount of talk about competitive. Maybe the compare, somebody comes in and does a presentation, says our solution versus their solution, and they give that level of competitive, but they don't really do strategy. Strategy overlays process. There is no cost adding competitive strategy to a sales training program. There's no cost. You don't have to change your process. All you're doing is you're adding the concept of strategy. That's preparation and identifying the account and what they buy, understanding, like the SWOT analysis of what your competitor has, but you can also do a SWOT analysis on the customer, and then building questioning strategies, which is every sales process has standard questioning strategies, but building them with intent. If I know that the customer buys from everybody, I'm going to ask questions. I want to ask about what do they like about, that other company that they buy from, versus just asking my standardized questions of, well, what keeps you up at night? That's the one, yeah. That's what keeps me
Oh
up
yeah,
at night.
that's my favorite. Yeah.
But start building in that preparation stage. The idea that I'm questioning with intent. I'm questioning to find out information. I'm questioning so that I can start aligning my business to the social needs of that particular customer. because that customer has different needs. I'm researching them on, as I mentioned earlier, we could use tools, but you can go into LinkedIn and get this information pretty straightforward of how a person sees themselves. Just read their profile. If they don't have any profile at all, then either one, they're super executive and they don't want to be known, or two, they don't have the confidence about themselves. It tells you very, very quickly. I'm sure, Carol, I haven't looked at your profile lately, but I'm sure it's very rich. I know mine's rich. I know most of the people that I work with. It's really important. So then now I understand the person. I understand the company a little bit. I understand what they like and don't like about the competition. And now I can build a strategy to go in there and beat that competition. And that's really part of what I call stage 1 and 2. Stage 1 is preparation or research, and stage 2 is strategy. And that, that brings me to the next point. So I just think it's very important that anybody's on this phone, on the line here, if they're sales trainers, then think about incorporating competitive strategy in your sales process, no matter which company. I've gone in and had conversations with some of the most successful sales companies, and they say, oh, we already have competition. And then when the customer looks at what I'm talking about with what they have, they add us to the process.
Right.
Because they want people to be more competitive in the beginning.
Right.
In fact, it's great for new hires because, new hires get thrown out there. They get all this sales process and thrown out there, and they don't know what to do. With competitive strategy, gives you something to do right away. You could focus on what the competition has and try to beat it. So,
but they don't have the constraints of this is the way we've always done it. It cracks me up because what my history is. I mean, I used to have big budgets, hire lots of vendors, talk to lots of salespeople. I know about what they offer, and big money. I mean, $1 million a year, easy for me personally as my budget. And I would ask these salespeople, "Who's your primary competition?" And they'd be like, "We don't know." I'm like, "What? How can you not know? And how can you not confidently say, yeah, we compete with these other people, and this is why we're the best at this, or we're the right one for you?" And it's the same thing with talking about money. It's like, I have a budget, I have to spend money. I'm talking to you as a salesperson. It's going to cost me money. Why do we have to be scared about that? We know it's going to be about money. We know it's going to cost something. And it can't just buckle us that we can't, like, I don't want to put the dollars out yet. It's like, what? It can't be I mean, to me, it's partly a confidence thing, but I think it's also what you're talking about with intelligence and strategy. If you are confident in your strategy, in your value, in your understanding of the business, the industry, and the customer, then you should be able to say, look, yeah, we're more expensive than those guys. Why? They're a pair of hands and we're a consultant. And if you want my advice every day, anytime, 24 hours a day, then of course we're going to be more expensive than that other group. Or something. I don't know, but don't tell me you don't know who the competition is. I mean, that kills me when I hear that. I mean, I don't understand.
Well,
so how do you get around that?
I'll take it. When you work with a big company like I typically do, there are different competitors at different places in the company. And so, and then you have a generic sales force that's supposed to sell everything.
Right.
Sometimes they do when they don't understand it. And that's why the battle cards and the things that you get online, there's tools that you can buy that are competitive tools that are very good. They'll give you the basic competitive positioning and intelligence information. And I would definitely use that. Most of the companies buy that nowadays, and they have those services online for competition. If the sales rep says, I don't know who the competitor is, then you got a problem, because they really need to understand that and who it is. And it's not always the same ones. As I said, based on the product categories, you could have multiple different competitors that do different things. You take a company like Kimberly-Clark, right? They make Pampers and they make tissue and they make all kinds of things. Their competition is dozens of them. Now, they don't have an enterprise sales force. They don't go in and sell Pampers in mass to General Motors. You know, maybe for some of these
Okay,
bigger,
you just threw
but
my
yeah,
brain
but
into something
yeah, I
there, but
know.
that's
Well,
okay.
but you know, and that kind of. Can you jump pop up that slide for me on number 4,
Sure,
just to kind of give a
sure.
point, because I want to switch to strategy, and
Yeah,
we've
and I
been
also want
talking.
to raise loss analysis before we forget. I just
Well,
don't want
that's
to
part of
forget it.
strategy. So
Yeah,
that's part of strategy.
yeah,
So,
because that
while you're
bring
doing
that up.
that, as
Yeah.
a salesperson, in my previous life, and kind of, I guess, in my new life, something that came to mind when you mentioned kind of the confidence and the competition. Um, how do you how do you speak confidence into a person, and is that a skill that you think that you can speak into a salesperson, or any person for that matter, right? Because a lot of times you hear, oh, that person's just so confident, or oh, that person is just so this. How do you actually take somebody who maybe isn't having confidence, whether it's in the product or in themselves or whatever? How have you been able to actually systematically make a sales team confident?
Well, I'm going to jump in first and say, in terms of the training, confidence is an important factor in elements that relate to sales. A big one is trust. So building a high trust environment requires, uh, competence, authenticity, honesty, and all those things that lead to a confident person, right? And so I think the thing to understand about salespeople, which I say all the time, is that they are not what all the mythology says about them. You know, big talkers, short attention span, all those things. They're not. They're success driven, and that means if they get something and they're successful with it, they'll do it 100 times, but they'll give it 2 seconds, and if it doesn't make them success, they will never do it again. That's one side of them. And they're risk averse. And so the risk averse side keeps them from being confident, because they don't want to take a risk that could cause them to lose a deal unless they're absolutely sure. Go back to the success driven piece. They'll they'll get the success. So it's a it's not a personality, it's a learned trait, but it relies on the fact that they have the right um, intelligence, they have the right information, but they also have a company that's behind them. And that's where sometimes the confidence can be lacking. And we look at it from the outside and say, oh, that's because they have a big meeting every year and they give them a nice leather bag, and they give them an annual trip to Turks and Caicos. Those rewards are important and they're incentives, but it's also representing the backing that the whole company, and remember, companies only do three things, and one of them's make money. And the way they make money is with salespeople. And those salespeople are critically important front line to making money for a company. And they need to feel that that whole company believes in them and appreciates them and supports them. And when that happens, they are confident, and they go. I mean, add to it, Bentley, and I'll bring up your
Okay.
slide.
Well, everything that, oh, the slide's already up. Everything that you said,
Oh, good.
plus, you know, the let's start with, new people. New people have a lack of confidence because they're new.
Right.
Just happens, right? Confidence comes with knowledge, right? Like, I'm fairly confident about competitive strategy, right? If I can talk to you all day long about it because I have a lot of knowledge. Also comes with practice. I've done this kind of thing multiple times. I've traveled the world. I've presented these strategies in sales classes. So I've got a lot of practice in doing it. And third is experience in it. And I've had good meetings and I've had bad meetings. I've won deals and I've lost deals. So over time, knowledge, practice, and experience makes a confident person. You can't expect somebody to do that right away, But what's really good is there's 2 or 3 things that I recommend. One, obviously, good sales training, understanding the process, knowing that the salesperson's going to get 20% of what you tell them, and be able to do that. So you have to have some level of reinforcement. Two, practice, both in the training classes with scenario driven practice scenarios. And if you can go as far as doing simulations or experiential learning now that through XR, VR, and XR kinds of technologies that give people the opportunity to actually practice without actually damaging a customer. And then third, if there's a sales manager involved, and that's a whole different game here, but the coaching side of things, actually working with somebody, talking to them, helping them think through, and letting them go out and make the mistakes and being there so that you can actually support them in the learning process.
Right, right.
And these are the things that are critical in that part. And by the way, knowledge includes understanding your competition. And that's that first part of stage one in preparation, is understanding the competition and understanding the account. So those kinds of things. Once you do that, you're just going to grow in your own experience and your own level of confidence. Salespeople have short attention spans. That is no question about it. You got to be able to get that across. I've always used another analogy that I love, is that if we go back to our time in university, there were 2 types of people in class. There were the studiers and there were the crammers. My girlfriend in college was a studier. She studied all week long. We went to class together. I never missed a class. I partied all week long. And on the last night, I'd go to Krispy Kreme, buy some donuts, and study all night long and cram for the test the next day. And I typically did better on the test than she did, which would really make her.
Oh,
right?
geez.
You could see how that would go. I don't understand this. I studied all week long. The difference is that she remembered more than I remembered because I only crammed. And
you're a model. You're a model to success, Bentley. What can I say?
But in reality, Carol, the people that studied all day long ended up in the marketing and the training worlds and those types of places
Well,
where
thanks.
they built information for salespeople to study.
Right.
And sadly, salespeople don't like to study. They like to cram. So everything you got to do when you start thinking about what helps a salesperson is you give them in small pieces. Micro learning has been so successful in sales because
absolutely
it gives them a little piece at a time and they don't have to do it. Also, just-in-time learning works extremely well, meaning I'm on my way to a sales account. I need to learn about this widget real quick and its value proposition, and I can go to a mini video or answer a simple question.
Exactly.
And that is very powerful for building confidence, and the way that salespeople do. But we talked a lot.
I just want to throw in one thing, if you let me. I saw on LinkedIn somewhere a meme that said, if you're nervous about going to meet with a customer, you're thinking about yourself and not the customer. And I thought, as soon as we flip that, that changes your. I mean, it's almost like a visceral physical change, like if you actually take that on and believe it. It's the reason you can show up on a webinar and have a fireside chat, because the whole point is to just for them, and it's just makes it easier. And if you're worried about all the other stuff yourself, you'll hold back.
So Carol, we only have about 15 more minutes with the team here. Let's do this. You and I could talk forever.
Of course.
But let's hone in on strategy. So I created this thing I called Cults, and there are 3 stages to Cults. In preparation and research, which we've already talked to quite a bit, is identifying the competitive intelligence, but also understanding the account and what kind of buying habits they have. Remember, we talked about the color codes being, white, never been there, red, competitor's account, yellow, I buy from everything, green, they buy from me often, blue, they never buy anything without talking to me first, right? Okay, and those are what I call the color codes, and it's a very nice way to understand your accounts, and you will change the opportunity, you'll change your questioning based on how they want to buy. I call this part of the social selling model because there's 4 people in the world there are 4 types of people, right? You have drivers, you have expressives, you've got analyticals, and you've got amiable people. And you got to figure out what kind of person am I selling to. I got to change my questioning and my intent based on that kind of question. All this is all part of preparation and research. Stage 2 is where the real fun happens, and that's strategy. Now, I've got 2 strategy concepts in here. One I call loss recovery strategy, and the other one I call trapping. Loss recovery strategy is that you never want to walk away from a deal with nothing. So let me explain this. This all just adds to your standard sales process. So if you have I'm going in, I'm on my second call, I'm with the customer, and I'm talking about their needs. They said, "Oh, well, we need a new accounting solution, but we also need a call center solution and everything else." The sales rep's like salivating on all the potential opportunities here. They're going to go out and write a big bundle. We're going to bundle all this thing together, and you're going to, here's everything. Well, what happens is they come in and it comes in at a big number, and it's something that can't be done. And so instead of saying, I'm going to work with you on this, they go ahead and give it to someone else. Now, the problem is that you've built up time. Multiple salespeople are coming in, talking to them. They've built up friendships in a lot of cases. And it takes an enormous amount of emotional capital, especially if you're an amiable buyer, to tell somebody they've lost. But if you give them the opportunity to have, let's say, split those 2 deals or have a smaller piece that they can hand to you, it lets them off the hook. They can give the deal to someone else, but they can also give you something. Now, I've had people say, I don't want that. Well, think about this for a minute. You're not going to win 100% of the time. I wish you could. It'd be very nice. But we all know that you don't win 100% of the time. So having a secondary opportunity that the customer can give you now makes them your customer. Before they were a prospect. And when they're your customer, you have a reason to be there. In addition, you could become the biggest pain in the backside to the competition because you can point out everything they're doing wrong along the way. And you're setting yourself up for the next year. You're setting your pipeline in place for the next year. So that's one of the loss recovery strategies that I say there's absolutely cost you nothing to do and has huge payback. And I've shown this to work very, very successfully with clients. So you got to think about that as you're going in. And that's a hard thing to start. But once you figure it out, you'll see that it actually works. The other thing is a loss recovery when you're the incumbent. If you're the incumbent, there is some competitor trying to get you out. If you haven't put in a loss recovery strategy that says to the customer has a way to actually resist it and let you know the competition, because there's nothing worse of when you predict that somebody is going to come in and you have it in your sales force, it's in your number, you're going to get this, and at the last minute it doesn't come in and you are completely blindsided. That means you have no loss recovery strategy in place. And what do? Call the executives, trying to drop the price, try to do everything to save it, but it's gone. Probably less than 20% of them are saved in that model. So loss recovery is one of those strategies you should integrate into your sales process. The second one is what I call trapping. Now, this one's a lot of fun. It's what you do is you're setting trapping. And the idea is that you don't create competitive advantage for yourself. You create competitive disadvantage for the competitor. Right. That's a little bit of a mouthful there. But when you think about it, what you're doing is you're controlling competitive engagements. You're talking to the customer not only about what the competition is going to do, which is what sales reps like to use those battle cards for, but also what the competition is going to say about you and what things they're going to point out. Remember when we talked about owning your weakness? The owning your weakness concept is, they're going to tell you that we are missing these items, that we don't have these things. Here's what we're doing about it, and here's how we work with our customers to make sure that that gets covered. And if the competition comes in and says something to your customer is going to say, I already know that. And what happens is they lose their credibility immediately. Tell me something I don't already know. Because, Carol talked to me about that, Bentley, and I know that problem exists there. And so I'm already over it. And it puts them in a very uncomfortable situation. And what happens is they become defensive at that point. And when you become defensive, you start to lose business. What it does, it neutralizes competitive attacks and you are controlling the competitive engagement. And the customer feels compelled after something like that and says, hey, Carol, Bentley did exactly what you said he was going to do. And you're both like laughing. I said, tell you, they're like a book. You could read them every time. And that's why we're a better partner with you than they are, right? And you can see it happening. What I have found is once salespeople learn about traps and how to set traps, they do it every time, because there's nothing that makes you feel better than a customer saying, they did exactly what you said. In fact, what else do you think they're going to say?
Right.
And they want to do more because it's actually fun on their part. So it proactively eliminates and neutralizes your competition. And this is part of the strategy side. Those two you can add to your sales process right now. And it doesn't cost you anything to do it. It's in my book. This Cults is all in the Checkmate book. I actually even have worksheets that if people want them, you buy the book and I send you a copy of the worksheets that you can integrate into your sales training. So that's stage 2 of the strategy. Carol, you have anything you want to say? And then I'll talk about silver bullet strategy real quick.
Only that I think I agree with you 100%. And I think, once they get the mindset around it, or they do it once, the risk averse, success driven thing, they do it once. A lot of times they actually are hearing about their competition from other competitors. They can build their case.
Right.
And that customers will actually tell you, I look at that vendor as a pair of hands, and I look at consultant. And so, you can kind of build your trap that way. At first, I think it sounds like it's got to be a complicated thing, but I think it's not. I do think,
really
though, loss analysis will help you with that. If you look at something you lost and you get to hear why they picked the other people, it's going to help you, give you the information that you need.
Of course. And if there are good loss analysis done, they're also very valuable. That's why I say always have a loss recovery strategy. It's not just the analysis. I want to have a recovery. And that's why I say I have a recovery from a new deal and I have a recovery from an incumbent deal. I don't want to lose everything, because once I lose everything, I'm out of the account. Trying to get back in is a nightmare. And that's the thing. So let's talk about the last part in the few minutes we have, and that's outsmarting and crushing the competition, because that's what everybody really wants to do. Everybody wants a silver bullet. Like we said earlier, there's very few silver bullets in the world. The way to make a silver bullet, the way to have a silver bullet is to create a silver bullet. And it uses the concept of fear, uncertainty, and doubt. And sometimes these kinds of strategies are very personal. But basically, you want to make a competitor's strength into a weakness. That's what people say. What? I said, yeah, you want to think you want them defending their greatest strength. Working with a client just recently, I brought this out, and he's like, they are the king of the mountain. They are the biggest vendor in their market by none. They have 8,000 salespeople, just to give you an example. And they said, geez, that is what our competition is doing to us. They're taking our biggest strength, our size, our public position, our products, and they're making us defend those products in front of the customer. He said, I never thought about it until you brought that up. But he says, that's exactly what they're doing. And what happens is the same thing. They start becoming defensive, and actually in some kinds it can be a snap where the statement is just absolutely kills a deal. When you say, what are you talking about? This is what happened to a little technology company called IBM. They were the king of the mountain, and everybody took that business away from them because they made their greatest strength, which was their huge product line, the huge amount of training. You never got fired for buying IBM. Absolutely. And all of a sudden you were that's old people stuff. And, it didn't modernize. When they were doing just about everything modern as well as just everybody else, they hung on to that for too long. And that's a silver bullet strategy. Now, I said there's a personal version of it. When you have a company that is dominant in a space, you want to create a panic, and you're using fear, uncertainty, and doubt, the famous FUD, they call it, to do it. And you execute a coordinated attack across a region, across the country, across the world, depending on the size and the scope of your business, where you're actually not attacking every account. You're attacking specific accounts and you're attacking specific sales teams or people. So for instance, if I go into a market like the Northeast where you are, or even New England, you're going to have accounts where account reps maybe have 4, 5, 6, 10 accounts. You can't attack if they have 10 salespeople in that office. You can't attack all 10 of those accounts. You can attack one, and you pick one in New England and one in the New York area and one in the Southeast and one in Texas and one in each of those areas, and you focus all of your efforts on their accounts. What you want to do is you're going to create panic that rolls up through the organization to the senior managers. They're going, they're all over every account we've got, when you're not. And what it does is it causes panic and it causes reaction. They start giving stuff away. You create all kinds of mindsets, but what it does is it opens them up for competitive penetration in a big way. And that's a whole different strategy. It's in the book. It's a very strategic strategy, but I call it silver bullet strategy because you're making silver bullets when there aren't any. And that's what's critical. So, just to kind of wrap up everything, Carol, before we call it, is that sales process is critical. Adding competitive strategy doesn't cost you anything. It's just part of your sales training. It gives your salespeople something else to do and use, and it works. It's the fastest way to revenue. I'll be honest with you, it really is, and it's a lot of fun, and I love doing it. And I hope people have a chance to read both of our books, kind of understand where this is going. And I'll leave it back to you. But thank you for having me today. It's been delightful.
Thanks. It's been great to reconnect. Any questions? And while we're teeing up a question, I'm just going to give a shameless plug that I've just submitted a book on sales training for instructional designers and sales enablement people, and it's going to be out this fall on empowering sales through superior sales training. Nolan, do you see any questions?
Sorry, I was on mute. I was asking the question. I was asking the questions as they came in. Most of what we're seeing here and the questions you ended up answering, and it was mostly just a lot of people saying, yes, I agree with what you've said, and yes, this is all making sense. And then also, where can I get more information on this? So I've pasted all of your information in the chat. I'm also just putting a generic email and encourage people to connect with you both on LinkedIn, because I know that both of you really enjoy, obviously, speaking about these topics and engaging with companies on these topics and helping them out. Really want to thank both of you for joining on this. This has been an excellent session. We have recorded it. We will be sharing the recording. We do a little bit of an editing just to make sure that we cut out kind of the front end and the back end so that it's nice, crisp, and clean for you. Please give us a couple business days to get that out, and then check your inbox for that recording. Again, on behalf of InfoPro Learning, thank you, Carol. Thank you, Bentley. We really appreciate it. And thank you, everybody that showed up and gave us an hour of your time. That is so incredibly valuable, and we appreciate it. Thank you.
I'm just popping up the book because someone asked
Carol,
for the name of the book.
You just can't help yourself.
Hey, I can't stop myself. I can't stop myself. I'm so excited about this book because the people that go into sales training, we're usually a team of one, and we need some support, and I want to support you. So that's the point of that. So just a quick shameless plug. Sorry. Thank you, Nolan, and thank you so much, Bentley. It's been super fun to reconnect.
I do. Yeah, it was really enjoyable, Carol, as always. And thank you. I was one of those customers of yours many years ago when you had big bucks to spend. So I'm still grateful for those days. Anyway, it was awesome. And as I said, the book's available on Amazon, as well as if you want the worksheets, I have the worksheets.
Bentley's book. Bentley's book. Checkmate.
Yeah. Oh, what's the name of the book, Carol? Somebody asked you to put, what was the name?
Can you put up slide 2, Carol?
And I put up yours, Bentley. I put yours and Carol's at the beginning. I'll put those back here for those that need those. And then, Carol, what's the name of your new book as well?
Empower Sales Success with Effective Sales Training.
our sales success with
did I lose your deck?
effective sales training. And then I just posted Carol's book and I reposted it. It's at the beginning of this. And now in just 1 second, I will be posting Bentley's book as well.
Cool. Awesome. Thank you.
Wonderful. Well, thank you all. We'll see you next time, hopefully.
Thanks so much.
Have a good day. See you all.
Bye.